Thank you for the introduction. As introduced, I'm a professor at KDS School, and I was there actually until Wednesday last week. I delivered lectures for economic history of Korea. So this could be kind of part of it, but this is kind of more specialized in kind of urban and rural problems. So I think we can have some chance to kind of discuss how Korea faced the new emerging kind of problems in the cities and the rural areas. And even though the main focus will be given to 새마을운동, which was introduced to address rural problems, but I would like to start with the urban problem. All right, so let me share the screen. I believe the PowerPoint slide is being shared. Is that right? Okay, yeah. So you might notice where this is. I'm not sure, but actually this is part of Seoul in the 1970s. If you happen to Korea and Seoul, you might know the Gangnam district very well. So this is Gangnam district. So until late 1970s, Gangnam was very rural area, and to ease the kind of house shortage problem, because so many people flow into Seoul, and we didn't have enough housing for all the people coming into Seoul. So we needed to develop the Gangnam area, which was largely kind of farm. As you can see, still some farmers were kind of cultivating the land using the cow, right? So I thought this picture could symbolize the dual problem of kind of urban and rural environment in the 1970s. So let me give you kind of quick kind of overview of this problem. This is taken from Romer, who won Nobel Prize in early 21st century. So urbanization is a kind of natural consequence of economic growth. And so economic growth causes urbanization, and in turn, urbanization causes further economic growth. So this picture says that urbanization facilitates further structural transformation from agriculture to industry and service. And as the formal sector expands, more people have jobs in the formal sector. So manufacturing plants and service establishment. So they gain more human capital because they also get education. So that contributes to GDP. So this is the kind of structure, and this is what Korea exactly kind of experienced. And because there was massive rural to urban migration, as you can see, the share of population living in urban areas. So urbanization rate from 1960 to 2023, it shows like a S type of curve, right? So in 1960, the urbanization rate was only below 30%. But beginning 1970, it's accelerated so that by 1980, more than 55% of the people lived in urban areas. And by 21st century, about 80% of people live in cities. And especially Seoul and neighboring areas have a lot of people living in, actually more than half of entire total kind of South Korean population. So South Korea is a country that experienced rapid economic growth, but also urbanization. So urban areas, cities, became the hub of kind of production, labor, and innovation, and they contributed to kind of national kind of income growth through kind of scale economies. I mean, the economies of being kind of big, right? So Korea offers kind of model of proactive government because in this process we had many problems, including the shortage in infrastructure and the lack of land use planning and the lack of fiscal capacity. So the government had to rely on not only public money, so fiscal budget, but also kind of private resources, and they contributed to addressing the problems. If you see this graph, you can see that still, especially in many South Asian countries and African countries, a lot of people live in cities, but they live in slums, right? And Korea had a very similar problem in 1960s and 1970s when so many people migrated from rural areas to the urban areas. But somehow, Korea kind of addressed this issue by first developing kind of more convenient and clean urban dwelling areas, and also improving the rural environment through Semal movement. So this lecture is about what kind of problems Korea faced and how Korea responded to those problems. So in some sense, we are learning how the kind of institutional learning took place in Korea. Okay. So even though the title says urban and the rural, but the lecture will begin with the urban problems, and then we'll move on to rural problems and Saemalundong. Okay. So here we again confirm that there's kind of positive relationship between GDP per capita, which is a measure of economic growth, and urbanization, right? And we know cities are the center of economic growth. And I simply explained that there's a kind of economies of scale and agglomeration effect. And to be precise, they have lower transaction costs, lower transportation costs, and because so many people live in the city, like big cities like Seoul and Berlin, we can find new workers so easily. So that gives a lot of kind of advantages to new startups. And because we have many innovative people who do their own businesses, more startups and more innovations are sparked. And this is called the functional urban area. And so firms located in the urban areas, they have a lot of advantages and they contribute to GDP, right? And governments, they do a lot of things because they want to utilize this kind of positive externalities, and they also promote more like a cooperation. This is well-known facts. And here, another picture here shows the share of the urban population who live in the largest city. So until 1970 and 1980, because so many people moved to Seoul, the ratio exceeded almost like a 40%. So in the beginning of 1980s and 1990s, the South Korean government developed more cities around Seoul. Actually, I was born in Suwon, which is one of UNESCO World Heritage Cities because there's a long, walls and fortresses, which is called Hwasong, and that is the capital city of Gyeonggi-do. Gyeonggi-do is the surrounding area of Seoul, and now Gyeonggi-do is the most populous province that houses more than 13 million people. But until early 21st century, Seoul remained the largest city. But with the development of Gyeonggi-do, the share of people living in Seoul has declined over time to almost 25% or something. Okay. And now, in addition to Gyeonggi-do, Incheon, where there's an airport and large port, they also have a lot of kind of population. So, I mean, these three regions, Seoul, Gyeonggi-do, Incheon, they are considered a kind of big metropolitan area, and they have cooperated together to address urban problems, including this. So as you can see, this picture, this is current Hannam area. Hannam is a small mountain just north of Han River that crosses Seoul. And until 1970, the northern part, I mean the traditional Seoul, that is positioned in the north of Han River, they had most of Seoul residents. But because so many people flow into Seoul right after the war, And after the urbanization started, so many people found their settlement in the Hannam area, and some of them found their home in the southern area of Han River. So that was the beginning of the development of the southern area. Now the southern area, and especially Gangnam, is well known for its kind of wealth and a lot of kind of luxury shops and many businesses. But until 1970, the north of Seoul was the center of everything, and they were suffering from the shortage of food and roads and water supply and sewage system. So the middle picture is something you can expect from Seoul in 1970s. So it's quite different from what you normally see from contemporary Seoul, because what you see is kind of skyscrapers and a lot of people, a lot of cars, and especially the river is well kind of developed. But until this time, this is shared toilet. So there are many unregistered houses like here, right? And even though they're not registered, the government installed some very basic infrastructure, including the electricity, right? But they have some problem in sanitation, because they don't have access to formal kind of sewage system, and they use this kind of shared toilet. So the housing problem was serious, and this kind of tin roof homes were very vulnerable to natural disasters like typhoon. So when there's a big typhoon, I mean, these houses were totally kind of shattered, and they had to rebuild the housing. So housing problem was becoming very serious, and the transportation problem also was becoming more serious, as you can see here. So this is in the kind of downtown of Seoul, near so the city hall. So that we had buses and we had trams, and the tram network was built by the Japanese and some Western, companies around the century, turn of the century between 19 and 20s, and that was continued to be used until 1960 or something. But as population exploded in Seoul, they couldn't meet the commuter need. So the government was thinking how to expand the road network and how to integrate with the growing need of better infrastructure, because you have road and you have sewage system, and you normally have some metro system like U-Bahn in Germany, right? So these need to be kind of integrated. You need more integrated kind of urban planning. That was the situation of 1960s and 1910. Okay. So there were many kind of policy responses. First of all, because sanitation was a very important problem, because Korea was still suffering from many kinds of diseases, especially contagious diseases, originating from bad sanitation. They tried to kind of develop the sewage system and separate the water and from underground water. And here you can see that this is Changkeun area. Now we don't have any road. We don't have any kind of covered kind of place. But to improve the road network, they built a road above here. So this leads to Dongdaemun, the east kind of main gate. So you can still see tin roofed kind of unregistered houses. So this was the situation of downtown Seoul until 1970. But the government had kind of strong will to get these things kind of sorted. But the problem was that they had some problem in finance. They couldn't mobilize a lot of kind of money, and they had some problem in using taxpayers' money in developing Seoul. So they established the Korean Land Corporation and Korea Housing Corporation to effectively mobilize capital and labor to solve urban problems and they were kind of a main vehicle of solving kind of urban problems. And they contributed a lot to solving kind of the slum problem, because you needed to kind of clean this slum-like area to build more like affordable but good quality housing, which is kind of apartment in Korea. Okay, right. And they invested a lot in road network. So this picture shows the evolution of kind of road network. So this was 1936 when we were still under the Japanese rule. As you can see, the southern area here, they were not developed, right? So this is current Gangnam, and here you have Lotte Tower, right? And you have Gyeongbokgung here, Deoksugung, and you have other palaces. So still, the main road network was developed around the main palaces during the Joseon Dynasty. And here there was kind of Yongsan. So Yongsan was where the foreign armies stationed in Korea over history. So from very late 19th century, the Japanese army, and then since 1945, the U.S. military army, and they used this corridor as a kind of supply line for the army stationed in Korea. So the road network was very limited to these districts. But as you can see, the pattern of kind of settlement expanded to the outskirts of traditional Seoul, right? So it expanded, and as the central government started development of the Gangnam area, and when they connected Seoul and Busan, and the highway comes to this way, the road network expanded, especially in the Gangnam area, right? So you can see a big difference between 1966 and 1972. And between 1972 and 21st century, there was further development into the western area and eastern area, right? And the road network became more kind of dense here and here, right? So you can see a lot of kind of difference. And in the 1970s, the first subway connecting Seoul Station and Cheongnyang was built, and now it runs like this, and you have second line, and you have third line, and now Seoul has more than 9 subway lines. So there was massive investment in 1970s to solve urban problems. Okay, but even though now metro plays the most important role in Seoul, but traditionally roads and buses played more important role because that was more economical, and it was much easier to do more integrated land and transit system. Another thing I would like to mention about kind of the urban problem is Korea introduced green belt very early, already in 1971, because the sprawling problem was already serious. Because I mean, you can see this map. So the dark green area, they show the urbanized area in 1970. So this Gangnam area was largely left as unpopulated area. But when they started developing this Gangnam district, the government was thinking that this could end up with very unplanned, sprawled city. So they decided to set up the green belt surrounding Seoul, right? To keep some areas green and alleviate some urban pollution problems, okay? And when it was first designated in 1971, it covered about 5.4% of national territory. And like I said, the objective was like a spatial control, so more systematic kind of urban planning and environmental kind of preservation, okay? And leapfrog development or sprawl, limiting that was one of the main objectives. But as Seoul continued to grow, and still many people find it very difficult to buy an apartment in Seoul because there was a shortage of housing supply. So more debates are heating up, and there are policy controversies over the use of the former and the current green belt. Because some people say that people come first, people come before nature, and because many people want to live in Gangnam, we can develop this area and we can build kind of many affordable apartments, and we can supply to people so that people can buy houses. But other people in the other group, they say, no, we should protect the nature, and this is kind of last stand because Seoul is already too much developed, and we have too many kind of skyscrapers and congestion problem, right? So still, there's kind of big controversy, and even though some deregulation was introduced in the late 1990s, still we maintain some still some sizable kind of green belt, and the central government tend to develop the surrounding areas like Bundang in Seongnam and Ilsan in Goyang, right? So as you can see, the early urban development concentrated in Seoul, but as Seoul became a kind of mega city that has more than 10 million people, later the central government focused on kind of outskirts of Seoul, and they still wanted to protect nature by keeping the green belt in place. Okay. And I'm going to move on to Sämaul-운동 and the rural problems. But before moving on, if you have any question, we will have Q&A sessions at the end. But if you have quick questions or clarifying question, you can ask now. Okay. All right. And then we'll move on to the rural problems. Okay. So the background, why the Sämaul-운동 and Sämaul movement started in 1970s. Because basically rural and urban gap was widening because we started industrialization. And so this was the main part I explained during lectures until last week in Berlin. Industrialization is the single most important event in the 20th century South Korean economic history, right? And industrialization was concentrated in the southeast corner and Seoul. Seoul also set up many textile and light industry factories, and many people, especially from Jeollado, from southwest corner, traditionally the production base of rice, they migrated to the north because there were many job opportunities there. So it's that kind of mass migration resulted in kind of big inequality between urban areas and rural areas. So while the government needed to handle urban problems like we saw, like the shortage of housing, and at the same time they needed to address the rural towns left behind, because young people left for the cities, and still there were some people who had to take care of agriculture that would supply food to the urban areas, and they needed to modernize the living conditions of the people living in rural areas. So that's why President Park Chung-hee, he started thinking that rural kind of stagnation is a kind of threat to national development. Even though the engine of growth can be found in urban areas, still rural areas were important because they were the main source of kind of food, and modernization. President wanted it to kind of penetrate to all the ends, all the way to the end of every corner of the kind of peninsula. So Sämaul-운동 was launched for that reason in 1970, and the goal was to revitalize kind of villages through kind of infrastructure reform, and maybe more importantly, mindset kind of reform. So this is actually a very controversial area because uh, so many people do not believe that this kind of top-down approach, kind of educating people to comply with some specific direction of the government policy, especially aiming at kind of modernization. But that time, the government probably thought that it was kind of luxury, maybe, and they wanted to kind of modernize the countryside and uh, kind of infuse some modern kind of values into kind of local people. So the Senmaundong started actually small, like there were 33,000 kind of villages. They received a very small grant of cement and steel. Why? Because most people lived in very traditional houses, right? So they needed to build more like a Western and modern style kind of housing in kind of rural areas, and they also needed to connect road so that people can drive cars to the urban areas and they can ship their kind of food and rice harvest to the city areas. So they needed kind of cement and steel. And the government kind of provided kind of cement and steel. So that's grant, right? Unconditional kind of, giving. But the problem is, it was not very kind of sustainable, right? Because there was kind of one-sided support. The government gave away cement and steel without any conditions, and it proved that only half succeeded in completing like self-driven project using local labor. So what the government was thinking was, because it was not just about kind of hardware, it was also about kind of software mindset. They needed and they wanted the local villagers to cooperate and contribute to common and public goods such as kind of road and common like a village hall and the common kind of equipment that can be used in agriculture. But only half succeeded. So they were kind of devising some kind of mechanism and policies that can promote more cooperation and coordination between villages. So they designed and they kind of made kind of big, more systematic approach. Then that was Hema movement for kind of on a kind of full scale and national scale. Okay, and people focused on the fact that um, we Korean people have some long historical tradition of kind of cooperation, like a mutual help, like a pumashi. I don't know whether you're familiar with this kind of word. In traditional Korean societies, especially during the Joseon Dynasty, there are many ways people organize kind of mutual help and cooperation. So pumashi was a kind of labor exchange. So you help me this time, and I will help you next time. Okay, especially when villagers have very important kind of family event, or they are in a kind of important kind of phase of farming and harvest kind of cycle, and there was kind of K, which was like cooperatives basically, and it was my community saving. So each villager contributes small sum of money, so make a common pool, big common pool. And when some of the people fall into kind of trouble, and then this cooperative make a loan, make a lending to the people in trouble, and that way they wanted to kind of make a kind of insurance mechanism within the kind of rural villages. So, um, like many other modernization projects, which was basically aiming at accepting more like a Western ways, but Asian countries wanted to keep some of kind of traditional components, right? And again, this time, President Park was wanted to kind of utilize, the traditional values. So he and his government kind of tried to kind of mix up the traditions and more like modern kind of mechanisms. Okay, so they promoted these kind of cultural values, and they also highlighted the fact that their early kind of attempts to modernize kind of rural environment, like 4-H club and YMCA and some UN-led development programs. And they commonly focused on education, hygiene, and youth engagement. So, but their limitations were like they were very small scale. So it was not enough to conduct more like a national kind of campaign. So uh, the main spirits and values, of the Sema movement was that we combine existing good traditions and a newly implemented but limited scale kind of initiatives like a 4-H, YMCA, and UNDP. So they synthesize everything, and they wanted to kind of combine top-down approach and bottom-up approach. And they wanted to kind of incentivize people, and they wanted local people to identify their own problem. So rather than being too much ambitious and too much like a reliance on the state or government funding from the top, they wanted people to be more like a voluntary and voluntarily contribute to the public goods, and the government wanted them to have kind of strong will to improve their own kind of living environment. Okay, and Sema movement was kind of fully integrated into national kind of economic strategy. Okay. So the political context is also important because, President Park Chung-hee is very kind of controversial figure in modern kind of Korean history because he was the leader of developmental state. I mean, he was very authoritarian leader, but at the same time, he used his kind of political power to pursue very kind of ambitious uh, economic kind of policies, such as industrialization and kind of modernization. So he kind of framed rural reform as kind of essential to national modernization, and this is a kind of memorandum written by the president saying that why we start this and what it aims and what are the expected kind of consequences. Okay, so by promoting this kind of initiative, he wanted to make sure that modernization takes kind of mental revolution, and it needs to go all the way to the end of every village or town. And he kind of wanted to maximize the use of his authoritarian power because he was a strong leader basically, and he had full control of the government and bureaucracy. And there was a Yushin Constitution, which was more like a some people say that it's kind of self-coup, but yeah, it was implemented in 1972, and it concentrated all the executive power on the president office. So he used its top-down control to pursue heavy chemical industrialization in the rural areas. He used that for kind of modernization of rural areas. Okay, and he effectively used the power of images because he regularly visited kind of villages and celebrated kind of model leaders who showed great performance in implementing a Sema movement. And he kind of held monthly briefings to kind of hear rural voices. Actually, this is also found in export promotion and industrialization. So he used the same institutional setting to listen to people in the field and reflect that in policy. Okay, so and the government and the president and the government use this kind of meetings and kind of images to give more power to the leaders within village. because still many villages had more like a collective culture and paternalistic traditional value system. So when a young leader is appointed and when that young leader pursues kind of modernization project, they were more likely to face kind of objections from village senior or elders. So that way, I mean, giving some authority to local leaders by kind of taking pictures together, like president and local leaders. So the president and the government wanted to give more kind of trust and leadership. Okay, so this is kind of three ideals of the kind of Sema movement. One, diligence, so hard work, and self-help. So it reduces kind of reliance on aid, not foreign aid this time, but the aid from all the way from the government, and cooperation. So these three were very essential to the eyes of policymakers, and they wanted to make sure that these three ideals are well embedded in villages so that it can be more self-sufficient and it can be self kind of propelling. So much of the policy effort went to kind of moral education and mindset shift. So they kind of encouraged like pride, and they linked modernization to spiritual kind of reforms, and they used media and schools to diffuse these ideas and the importance of kind of discipline and kind of thrift. So, I mean, these were crucial in kind of rural improvement projects, and they connected that to with kind of urban kind of value system, and they put them under kind of common banner, which is modernization of our country. And this is the governance and institutional setup of the Sema movement. I believe you would have seen from the ADB report, right? So the central government, especially the Ministry of Home Affairs, their work was kind of coordinating national kind of implementation, because there were many government agencies that were related to Sema movement, right? So different ministries might have had different ideas over the ideals, goals, and effective tools of SEMA movement. So the Ministry of Home Affairs, they focused on kind of mediating different kind of needs and different ideas of different ministries. And as you go local, right, implementation is up to these smaller kind of units, okay? So they set up many Semal councils at the village level. So even though they appointed Semal leaders, but they were not dictators, but they were required to listen to the demand of the villagers and reflect them into commonly drafted kind of plans, and they implement as kind of planned, okay? And they had general assemblies to approve project and budget. So every village had a very similar structure to the kind of central government, like parliament or national assemblies, and the executive power. And a little more about kind of leadership kind of structure. So each village elected one female leader and one male leader democratically. So this was very a big innovation, because traditionally old people and senior people and elders, they had kind of moral leadership over the village. But by introducing this kind of election system into villages, they could give more kind of legitimacy and power to the elected leaders. And those elected leaders, they managed labor, they managed finance, and they managed reporting to the government and communication with the government. So they were basically addressing the administrative need, but they were not bureaucrats. they were more important as a kind of symbol of modernization, as a symbol of newly introduced kind of institutional kind of setup. And like the Sema movement itself promoted, they also linked kind of traditional kind of ethics with kind of modern administration to effectively motivate villagers to move in a kind of positive kind of direction. Okay, and they received kind of training, and training was about some technology and some commercial activities, but also that included kind of accountability principle and service. Okay, so it was not kind of status. So that's the point where we make a kind of departure from traditional setup of kind of village kind of system in for cooperation and labor exchange. Okay, so I recommend you to remember this. So they were, according to statistics, they tended to be younger, more educated, and respected individuals. But they didn't gain respect from the beginning. Like I said, the government did many campaigns and many public kind of relations effort to show that these leaders are important. So villagers, you have to give respect to these people because they represent the government effort that we should modernize the country. Okay, so we find a lot of kind of elements of grassroots kind of democracy because local people, they had kind of votes and like one vote per household. So it kind of empowered residents kind of decision. And village development committees, they executed the plans approved by, council. So Sema was not just top down, right? It's kind of created kind of participatory civic culture. And that is why Sema movement is more like a generalized in the name of community-driven development, right? Because, you know, many low-income countries, they have modernization project and they have economic growth project, but it's largely like a top-down, right? The government set up the plan, and the executive branch, they implement, right? But uh, it might be effective when it comes to economic policy, okay? But when it comes to more like a social development, it cannot be successful with the participation of the local people and affected people, right? So the designers of Sema movement, they well recognize the importance of kind of bottom-up cooperation. So they carefully designed the Sema movement because they were crucial in the success of the Sema movement. Okay, right, and therefore they invested a lot in training Sema leaders. And like I said, each village elected one male, one female leader, and they were required to spend 1 to 2 weeks in intensive residential programs. So the learning could be more like immersive. Okay, so it was and it was kind of blended kind of education of lectures, field visits, and group discussions. So more practical training was recommended, and actually many training programs were designed that way. As you can see, about 30 hours out of 105 was spent in enlightening this Hema spirit. So it was more like a moral kind of education, and this more like a practical ones, like tour of Sema Undong sites and case studies, discussion. So it was more about promoting discussions and their own ideas and their ideas about how to implement the discussed and agreed plans. So case studies combined with deliberation and discussions. So by promoting this kind of culture, when the trained leaders are back in town, they were expected to do the same. So combine people's kind of willingness, people's opinions, and they can use it kind of basis, democratic basis for, further, cooperation and development kind of programs. So in some sense, it can be called like irony because, this democratic kind of movement was facilitated by authoritarian, central government, right? So this is kind of paradoxical and ironical, but these democratic elements contributed a lot to, achieving the expected goals quite effectively, okay? And the cross-sector reach was also promoted, which means like urban elites, like officials, professors, and entrepreneurs. They were kind of later trained and they were sent to like rural areas to share the kind of values, and they exchange kind of practices and ideas. And by investing in kind of training, they could effectively, promote the core of Sema movement. And there are many kind of testimonies, and there are many memoirs, and especially the memoirs by women leaders. They commonly say that when they were simply kind of housewives, they didn't find much kind of meaning of kind of life, and they had some thirst for more like a bigger role in the village. But because it was mandatory for each village to elect a Sema leader, and they spent a lot of time in training, which was not very easy because Korea was very agricultural kind of country, right? So they got some special kind of treatment, including 1 week or 2 weeks in the training center, and then came back with kind of trust of the government. So they did many things like leading savings club and leading hygiene campaign and family planning because fertility was very high at that time. I mean, you cannot imagine that now it's like 0.7 something, but that time it was 4 or even 5. So it was necessary to plan a family. So Sema movement contributed a lot to family planning, and they also kind of staffed semi factories and household kind of enterprises, and they participated in many income generation projects. So through this kind of participation in economic activities, they improved their status further, and they promoted their status within household, within village. So they contributed to more like an equality between kind of genders. Okay. And how was it financed? The figure on the right, it summarizes how it was kind of funded. So in a sense, it's like matching funds. The government give kind of grant for like a farming, for cow breeding, for pig raising, for land reclamation, and the villagers were asked to contribute equal or more amount of money for this kind of compound project. That was village fund, right? And to promote and to help more participation, the government also commissioned some work in the form of kind of village contract, and there were kind of profit and labor compensation, and half of it was used to kind of save, and they were reinvested into village fund, and some of profit went to kind of village income. So in this structure, you can see that the way Sherman movement was designed was giving some profit incentives to people through profit. right? And also it mandated the contribution of profits to common pool of money, which was village fund, so that they can do these kind of compound and common kind of projects. Okay, so I highlighted the importance of self-help and cooperation, right? So you can see these values in this design, right? Self-financing and some microloans were kind of provided by village fund and village banks. So members of the Sema movement, they could have access to kind of village fund, right? And the government gave more like a benefit, such as kind of electricity and other infrastructure to promote more kind of participation. So the government evaluated villages based on their performance. So how many new farming and new cows, and they also evaluated how actively village people actually contributed to the village fund. So they rated into like A, B, C, and they provided more kind of public government subsidy to grade A villages. And here you can see some statistics and report. So as you can see, government kind of support was like, out of 758 in 1979, about 200 was from the government, and national budget was used, and that accounts for about 125 out of 758. But almost kind of equally important share was taken by self-support and local kind of budget. So about more than half of the money came from the villagers themselves, right? So this highlights the importance of Semal Undong as community-driven development. And here you can see some, historical kind of documents. So this one says that these people promised and pledged that they will contribute land in accordance with the government money and president kind of rent, right? And this also kind of confirms the contract between kind of village cooperatives and villagers that they will donate land. And this is about kind of using some money and some fraction of kind of construction money for kind of village funds, and they will use the village funds to promote more kind of welfare of the people. So the Sema movement was conducted in 3 kind of stages, and already in stage 1 we could see some visible kind of improvement. Like many isolated villages were connected to roads and bridges, and they had access to clean water with wells. And some important values were well kind of infused into kind of villages, and they embedded those. So this kind of virtual cycle already started, like government support to promote like village action, and success receives further support from the government. Okay, and there was kind of national campaign to promote villages that competed for recognition and actually won, and they got more rewards, right? So the Sema movement created some kind of ecosystem of kind of improvement and feedback mechanism. And in stage 2, participating villages had more like a tangible kind of benefits in the form of like more cash and more rices. Okay, and in stage 5, based on earlier success, villages and village leaders, they tried more like a diversification in the beginning, because most South Korean farmers, they produce rice. Much of focus was given to how to increase the rice production. But in stage 3, they tried some new crops such as peanuts, citrus, and ginseng for extra kind of money and export. and they started running some small-scale kind of factories to process local goods and create jobs. And it made the villages to become more like a market-oriented. Okay. And microloans and cooperative, they provided some loans to those kind of more diversified kind of businesses. And I would say that government helped the introduction of new kind of crops like pineapple, burdock, chili. I mean, these were not very common that time. And also the government promoted like export to Japan, and they provided some subsidy for mechanization and electrification. So here's the result, like income per household of the rural farmers increased so fast. And it also increased the laborers in the kind of urban areas. And even though it was a little faster in kind of urban areas, but you can see that rural farmers, they increased their income effectively throughout the process. And in doing so, farm infrastructure, mechanization, innovation, they all contributed to this kind of income growth, right? So the difference between urban and rural area remains very small. So if you see the ratio of the rural farmers over urban farmers, it used to be kind of 60-70, which means that they earn like 20 to 30% less than the urban counterpart, but they started more than urban laborers, and that reduced the gap between cities and farms, and it reduced the incentives to move to the cities. And like I said, I mean, the values of Semal, I mean, can apply to cities in the late 1970s. And they targeted schools, offices, and apartment neighborhood. So apartments, they are the center of all social kind of activities and movement in South Korea. And even though the beginning of the kind of Semal movement was like top down, the government designated and the government provided training, but because the rural development was very successful, it fed back into kind of cities, and it promoted like good civic habits like cleanliness, punctuality, and thrift. So there's a factory project, and there were many improvement in housing, health, and nurseries. I believe we can come back to these important kind of things during the Q&A session. Okay. And you know, this like 신바람, which means kind of passion and zeal and pride, right? These were essential in motivating kind of villages. So this is a kind of certificate saying that this village is considered the best practice kind of villages that, you know, realize the important kind of values of kind of diligence, self-help, and cooperation. So the government will provide more kind of support to the village. So these certificate and these kind of awards were used to kind of motivate kind of further voluntary contribution to the common good and promote kind of moral kind of values of Sema movement. So the modern interpretation of Sema movement is kind of social capital formation, like a trust, right? So economists now say that physical capital, like machines, buildings, are important, but social capital is also important. People need to trust each other, and people must be willing to contribute to the common good, right? So that's how Semal Undong is remembered, and some important like aspects such as participatory decision making, social inclusion, and civic accountability. These are, I mean, keep being reinvented and used for contemporary kind of project. I'm saying this because, you know, there are critics, right? It's obvious that the top-down control was important, and the village leaders were pressured to deliver results, right? So this can raise a concern that whether some similar movement in other countries can produce same outcomes, right? You can have that kind of concern, right? So, sustainability issue, like if that relies on kind of strong leaders' will, how can we promote more participation, right? And equity and exclusion, because the program was designed to reward well-performing villages. So some villages might lose their confidence and they can be further left behind. So we now export this model, but by addressing these problems and making them more adaptable to different kind of contexts like Vietnam, Rwanda, Indonesia, and other African countries, right? So the Semal movement actually has a lot of kind of demand from those countries, right? So we promote more Semal, but not in the same form, in a more like a modernized and more democratized form. And we highlight the importance of kind of knowledge transfer rather than simply sending concrete and just transplant the same mechanism. We try to kind of let them understand the core values and core kind of mechanism so that Korean Sema movement is kind of being reinvented and contribute to solving kind of world problems. Okay, so that's how we work to kind of scale up participation and replicate the Korean success. Okay, so actually I have a lot more and more details to share, but I think I can finish the lecture here and we can have more free Q&As and discussions. So I welcome any questions and I also welcome any kind of comments so that we can have more discussion, okay? So let me finish here. Thank you. And I think we can move on to Q&A.